Can you tell me what's new with NFB this year?
Well, we have a lot of new things coming on at the NFB, and I think particularly when we look at, for example, the interactive programming, we've really come out of the gate in a big way. I think we're probably leading the world in terms of understanding that all the digital platforms are not just platforms for traditional content, it's allowing new modes of creation. So when you think of Pine Points, which has won 2 Webbys, Islander, which has won the International Emmy, Digital Emmy, Bla Bla, which is featured in Le Monde and Liberation papers around the world, you're beginning to see something startling and different, and that's really interesting. I think the work we're pushing ahead in our traditional areas and re-examining feature-length documentaries, for example, is interesting. We have a number of projects that will be coming out later this year that I think will cause some waves. We also have pushing forward with some really interesting experimentation in the space of new kinds of work, such as the world's first film shot in high definition infrared in 3D.
Oh, infrared.
Infrared,
okay.
high def.
High def. Oh, so what's the subject area, subject for this?
It's a dance film, and it's done with original choreography done for the film, and it's marvelous. It just kind of transports you. You understand when you bring artists to kind of control and work with and play with new kinds of technologies, you can come up with some extraordinary results. And I think that's at the heart of everything we're doing. It's not about technology per se, but it's the use of technology on the one hand to create new forms of expression, and secondly, to use technology to be where our audiences are, to connect with them profoundly across all platforms.
Funding has been I guess, a challenging area in the last few years. Has the issue of funding been improved with the current government?
We have a terrific relationship with the current government. I think our Minister Moore, is one of the best we've had long term. He understands the kind of work we're doing. Our funding has not shifted. I mean, we've stayed the same. It means, of course, that there is some erosion because we're not indexed, and it's the same parliamentary allocation. What we've done is look at new possibilities. I mean, we've done massive investment over the last few years, for example, in this digital shift, and we did it through finding no new funding for that, but we found the money through internal efficiencies, and we've been able to reallocate. And we're looking at the future and saying, where are the new possibilities without all the time having to rely on government. We absolutely need very solidly our base funding. I think it needs to be shored up, but we can also help ourselves.
Yeah. One thing I love about it is the NFB putting digital library, many of the films, short film, feature-length documentaries, and I've discovered many old classic and new films online through iPad and online just on the web. Are there more initiative on putting more films online, and how's the funding on that? I mean, are you guys, I guess twofold, are you guys having the needed funds to make that possible, and are you guys trying to make money off it?
First of all, we keep adding each year, and in fact, it's part of that investment that I was talking about, that we found our internal allocations, and we'll keep adding films every year. We have, in fact, a whole plan, a strategic plan to try to kind of, over the next few years, shift as many of the films in the collection as we make them available. And part of them, and substantial cost, because simply on rights alone, we have to clear, we're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on that, for example.
So you actually do clear the rights, I mean, with additional cost implication, I mean, to the artists and creators of those films.
We must.
Well, of course, yeah.
So we do that, and there are long-term implications there, because the rights we clear, it's not like in perpetuity. That means in, say, 5 years, we have to come back and start to reclaim. So there's an ongoing monetary, financial issue about how do we sustain accessibility simply on that rights thing. Also issues around ensuring, and we're planning for this, that we keep the possibility to keep migrating as technologies and platforms change so that we're available. So, for example, we're available online. We're also available through the apps on the iPhone, the iPad. Earlier this year, we launched our Android app, and we're in a partnership with WIM so that we're packaged with the Playbook as well. And we're now looking at connected TVs and making sure we'll be able to migrate to that platform as well. So we're pushing that, and we're thinking, 3, 4, 5 years down the road in terms of planning how we're going to manage this in terms of ensuring we're there with our audiences. All the stuff that we're doing is free by streaming.
Yeah, it's free and it's great. And a note on free now. So are you guys thinking of having sponsor or in a line of PBS and want to have finding funders for film, like putting acknowledgement so that like you can get some money off?
No, we haven't.
What kind of revenue are you guys thinking?
Well, we do, first of all, traditional distribution. I mean, we sell documentaries around the world to broadcasters, but no, we're actually in position very soon to launch. We've set up a whole transactional system. So it's free by streaming, but in short order, we keep getting demands saying, well, we want to own it. So now...
people own it, like people want to keep it. So
we are set up now to be able to, we have a whole system in place to essentially become like a Canadian iTunes so that people can pay to download to own. We can do VOD, we can do subscription, we can do a whole range of possibilities without losing free. I think the world, in terms of the digital world, is so different that you can actually come up with inventive new models that still allow us to serve Canadians and yet be able to keep looking for the financing. And the one big difference is as we move to that and look for these kinds of revenue sources, there's a key message for all those people who do want to own is that every single penny that is spent, on buying something is reinvested in programming for our audiences. We're not a for-profit. We don't have to pay. Our shareholders are citizens, and we pay them back by ensuring they're getting the programming they need.
Right, and we don't geo-restrict access to Canadians only. I mean, anyone from around the world are free to access it.
Absolutely, because it's the legislated mandate. The way the framework is in terms of the Act, it says to reflect Canada to Canadians and the world. So we have to make sure we're connected. In fact, almost half our online audiences are now coming from outside Canada.
Wow, that's cool. And what's the online access population like? I guess in terms of numbers.
Yes, I mean total numbers since over the last 2 years since we've launched, we've had on our sites and on our partner sites over 22 million viewings of NFB films.
In a year?
In the last 2 years.
2 years.
And it's growing. The thing that's interesting is when we look at the stat, is it hasn't leveled off. It hasn't been like, we reached a plateau and that's it. It keeps growing because, audiences are still discovering us. The thing is that unlike other media companies, we don't have the financing, the deep pockets to do the kind of massive consumer marketing and advertising campaigns. So we have to do it in other ways. We have to be smarter. We're trying to get the words out in other ways. And people keep discovering us. And one of the new drivers now increasingly will be all this original interactive work, which is not really available anywhere else in the world. And
original interactive
work. Things like Pine Point, like At My Window, like Bla Bla, like Holy Mountain. All of these things are kind of giving, particularly that world of viewers who are engaged with an understanding of this new form of telling stories and it can't be done in any other place except on the digital sphere.
Right. I understand you have an MBA from University of Toronto, so I don't know if you are the first big man from at the NFB that has an MBA, right? But what did that actually, that aspect of you add to your job as the big boss at the NFB, National Film Board?
I think it's partly a whole rounded thing, because in addition to that, my first degree was in Chinese studies, for example.
To balance it, Chinese studies.
So you bring together many kind of different perspectives. So what it adds is that ability, on the one hand, to push forward with a kind of a sense of, I think, a broad cultural, social understanding of the other things that I've done in my life, but then also to anchor that to very solid, pragmatic business sense, and say, how do we make sure that we can do things? So it's great to have all these ideas. The way we made them happen is we completely, our organizational structure, our financial structures are more solid than ever before. Our ways of kind of working, and I think that kind of business training helps in that.
And let me end with a few random questions. One of them is, how big is your apps development team? Like, how many people are there, like, working on the apps and fixing bugs and problems? Like,
it's actually a small team. It's led by Joël Barmarlo, who's been terrific at this, with a team of, it's roughly, probably around under a dozen people also.
Right. And I guess you have mentioned about some of the new interactive initiatives. Any big documentaries or big features that is going to come out in the coming year?
Yeah, as I mentioned, we are having a number of big, both in animation and feature documentaries. We have a big project. Leah Poole, who is best known for her feature, theatrical feature works, has just finished a major feature documentary called Pink Ink about the corporatization of breast cancer. We've been working with Sarah Pauly, who's one of our great stars and directors, doing her first feature-length documentary, which will be out by the end of the year, beginning of next year. We have out of Quebec, Desjardins, who's one of Quebec's best-known singer-songwriters, but who's been a filmmaker with us over the last 10 years, coming up with a major new work. So we've got Jennifer Basewell finishing off Playback based on the Margaret Atwood book on debt. The range of work is really interesting, and I think what's going to happen there, we have a range of many different works, experimenting with the narrative forms of using stereoscopy, that is 3D, both in documentary and animation, and that's a whole other thing, and that's kind of, again, we're breaking some new ground, and there'll be some interesting stuff coming out over the next 6 months.
Do NFB see 3D as a thing that can truly help telling the story, or there's a little bit of a gimmick in it too?
No,
I think Herzog was one of the great documentarians. Like, his new film is in 3D, but I think he also still feel that there are only very limited use of 3D in specific situation. And
it's a good question, but we're driven by not gimmick, but the sense of, the artists we work with is all about what is this language? How does it create a new experience? I mean, I mentioned we did this film, high-def infrared 3D, and it was really the plasticity, it's the sculptural sense of that's when there is, in addition to the Herzog film you mentioned, for example, Wim Wenders did this amazing film, Pina, in 3D. It'll be coming to Canada in the next month. Extraordinary how 3D was used in that to create a very different sense of story. It's a monument. I think 3D will go through growing pains. Obviously, it's had a kind of a big kind of burst with Avatar and other films, maybe leveling off. But it's not going to go away. It's going to become something that's going to be increasingly important down the road, particularly, when, for example, the technology gets to the point that we can have 3D without glasses.
Yeah, without glasses, glass-free. That's what I'm looking for.
The big game changer on all of this.
Yeah, at home especially.
At home, exactly. And we're trying to figure out, how do we create those kinds of experiences and ways of telling stories that fully utilize it and become a different art form. It's not simply, traditional cinema.
Great. Well, thanks a lot, Tom, for your time today.
I really appreciate it. Thank you for coming and talking to me.